France 30, Scotland 27. What a game. An antidote to what Wales and England served up at Twickenham earlier in the day. I would argue, I know the Wales and England game ended up being an exciting finish, but I thought was pretty low on quality, as any of you who've watched my video of my review of that game would know. But this is all about France and Scotland, because I think this game was fascinating and I think still poses so many interesting questions heading into the World Cup. So have your say down below. Are France really one of the front runners to win the World Cup? And what can Scotland do? They continue to trouble the best teams in the world, but are they able to get over the line in those games? Those are the two really interesting questions for me. So you can have your say down below. Make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel as well. But let's get into it. So I was on commentary for this game and just enjoyed it from start to finish. It was far higher quality. It looked like two sides who were just in a much better place in terms of this World Cup cycle and in terms of the continuity of their play, which is no shock. That's not anything new. We didn't learn that in this match, but it was just really, really enjoyable. And I almost don't know where to start with it. Scotland started brilliantly and took the lead. Then France came back into it and were sensational in some passages of their play and some of the tries that they scored. It looked like they'd taken the game away from Scotland, and then the Scots came back into it. So let's start with France, shall we? France are a side who have a home World Cup, who over the last 4 years have had a Six Nations Grand Slam, have gone a calendar year unbeaten. But genuinely, when was the last time that France looked like they could win a World Cup? I know they absolutely battered England at Twickenham and they tore England apart. They were brilliant, but England are pretty poor at the moment as well. I know they played really well in that Six Nations game against Ireland in terms of the quality of their play, but they did still end up losing it. And I think they've had a number of matches like this where even on home soil, it could have gone either way. Scotland will look back at the game in the Six Nations in Paris and feel that it's a game they should have won. They've had tight victories against the Springboks. They've had a tight victory against Australia. Now, there are two ways of looking at this, and one is the best sides in the world are able to win even when they're not at their best, and they're able to win games by a tight margin. I completely accept that, and I think France clearly are able to do that. I would also suggest that it has been quite a while since we saw France put in an 80-minute performance, since we saw them really dominate a whole game, because that was the story again here. This was a Scotland side that came out the blocks faster, and this was a Scotland side that were able to come back against France. And if this was a better side, if this was the Springboks, if this was the All Blacks and the way they've been playing, if this was Ireland and how good they can look at times, would France be able to do it in a tense World Cup knockout game at home? I guess that's the kind of context that I'm looking at this match through the prism of. Because on the one hand, France made loads of changes from last week. This is the first time since the Six Nations they've been closer to their full strength, and they did show us what they can do. Dupont was brilliant at times. Ramos was excellent at fullback. Penaud was quiet in the first half, but then burst into life in the second and was excellent as well. So I completely accept that France are still a very, very dangerous team, and the fact the World Cup is at home means they will be absolutely in the conversation for who can win it. But I just wonder when the last time was we really saw them produce an incredibly good display over 80 minutes. I think it's been a little while, personally. Let's get on to Scotland, because Scotland are an enigma in themselves almost. I mean, where they are in the world rankings is absolutely bang on, isn't it? Because they're way better than the teams below them. In terms of England, Wales, Australia, Argentina, you would back them to beat those teams at the moment with how they're all playing quite comfortably. But they always struggle to get over the line against the best teams in the world. And again, it was another... But I should say as well, caveat that, I know they beat France last week, but it was a second or third string French side. Against the best sides in the world, when those best sides in the world have something close to their strongest team. Because if we look back over it, I mentioned they will feel they should have beaten France in the Six Nations. They will absolutely feel they should have recorded a historic win against the All Blacks last autumn, if you remember that game at Murrayfield. They will feel that they let the game against the Wallabies at Murrayfield the same autumn get away from them. That was the one you might remember, Nick White with the 22, where he was really clever at the end of the game and almost grubbed it out of play, so Australia won. So quite consistently, I think Scotland, they play really well and they push the best teams in the world, but they don't quite get over the line. They don't quite have that clinical edge enough to be able to win those games. And a bit like the discussion I was just having about France, there are two ways to look at this. As a Scotland fan, and the Scotland fans in the comments, how do you view this? Do you view this as Scotland going toe-to-toe with the best teams in the world? getting so close to a really good French outfit on French soil and almost beating them, almost beating the All Blacks, being so close? Or do you view it as a side that just aren't quite able, for whatever reason it may be, whether it's about quality of player, whether it's about composure, that are not quite able to get over the line? That's my big question mark with Scotland at the moment, because you watch them, they play some great rugby, they push the best sides in the world, they then put in really underwhelming performances like against Italy at home in the Six Nations, where Italy should have beaten them. So when we talk about the World Cup, are we right to include France in the list of teams that could win it? And while Scotland are obviously outsiders, should they be more involved in those discussions as well, because of how consistently they're able to produce good performances against those best teams? It would have been fascinating if Scotland had won this game. If France had lost their first World Cup warm-up on home soil, I don't know, I think there'd have been some pretty uncomfortable questions. I'm trying to think what else from the game, really. I think France have strength in depth. We see that. I think it is the continuity of their play. Scotland, likewise, it was when they started to cough the ball up and were ill-disciplined that France were able to capitalise on those mistakes. But when they were able to go through the phases, I thought Kinghorn actually at fullback looked excellent. Finn Russell, his kicking from out of hand was outstanding, apart from the box kick where he had to play 9 when Ali Price was sin-binned, that he shanked out on the full. There's so much for Scotland to be pleased with, but are they quite good enough to beat the best teams? That's really, I guess, what I'm pondering. And for France, I think they can get better. I think we've seen them be better. I think they need to be better to win the World Cup. If they are to be in that final on the 28th of October, or whatever it is, in Paris, I think they need to play better than they have done over the last, I suppose, 12 months, really. But you can let me know what you think in the comments section down below. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant game in St Etienne. France 30, Scotland 27. Like the video and subscribe to the channel as well. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.